Thank you. Those who are present, either in person or virtually, we welcome to our work session of the Ogden City School District Board of Education meeting this evening. We got April 30th, the last day of April. Hard to believe we're moving along so quick. It just seems like yesterday we were meeting here as a group, which was 40 some odd days ago. I'd like to make reference on my left, our business administrators, on my right, our superintendent, Dr. Risch Nye, Nancy Blair, Doug Barker are present in the boardroom. I can see Jeremy, Susan, I think Joyce is there, and I'm not sure if Jen's there, but and Paula's here, as well as our technical people. We got Cameron and Jeremy helping us out tonight. So we're going to jump right in. I'm going to turn the time over to Dr. Nye, who's going to introduce our first person on the agenda in our work session, Senator Van Milner. So, Rich, go ahead.
Thank you, President. Okay. Well, welcome everyone. It's a pleasure to be with you virtually or here in the boardroom. I am especially grateful to all those who are interested and have a connection with the Ogden School District. Tonight, we're very fortunate. Before I turn some time over to Senator Milner to discuss some legislative updates, I just want to, for this group to know how fortunate we are to have Senator Milner representing us and the manner and capacity in which she goes about doing the things she does for on behalf of the Ogden School District and across the state. As many of you know, she has a thorough understanding of the systems and the interrelatedness, the interoperability of education across the state, from pre-kindergarten all the way through college and tech college. And so it's with that mindset that she approaches a lot of what she does, and we've been the beneficiaries of her work on the Hill. So we're very fortunate to have her, and look forward to the legislative updates that are coming our way in the field of education and some of the challenges facing the state. Senator Milner, I turn the time over to you to lead us through that discussion.
Thank you very much, Superintendent, and thank all of you for giving me a little time on your work session agenda tonight to talk about some of the work that's been going on actually in terms of thinking about education and education funding over the last year. And as you all know, we do have an earmark, constitutional earmark on education, but it's actually earmarked to the income tax fund, which is really one of the most volatile funds in terms of a tax structure in the state. And all of us have experienced that volatility from time to time as the economy gets stronger and we're able to put more money in education, but then we will have recessionary times, and because income tax is so volatile, then we have to take significant cuts. So we've been trying to think through how do we really find an approach going forward that would help us to really stabilize funding for education, be able to protect it in the future, and grow it over time. And at the same time, give us some flexibility at the state level to meet other needs, particularly that our children have. And I think Ogden School District probably knows better than any school district in the state that it's very important for us, if we're going to help children learn, it's important for us to help them have meet some of their other social and emotional needs in order to be able to facilitate learning in the classroom. And we need some flexibility to be able to do that. And then we also know that we have individuals with disabilities who need more help and assistance, enabling them to be able to learn and to be able to live productive lives as all of us do. So we spent a great deal of time over this past year really trying to look at different optional strategies that might help us do that. help us find a way to really be able to stabilize our funding and over time be able to grow that funding. And one of the things that we all really realized is that the earmark on education funding didn't necessarily mean that, not that we had increased funds in education. What we really need is a framework or a system for actually funding education. So what does, we passed some legislation. There are actually two pieces of legislation that we passed that I think are extremely important for our boards and our teachers and others around the state to understand the implications, because this is really something we're putting out for a vote to the people. There is a proposal, SJR 9, that would allow us to expand the use of education funds to be not only to support education, but also to support our children and individuals with disabilities, so we can meet some of the other needs that come around those particular groups to help support learning. That will be on the ballot, and I think it allows us to facilitate really being able to meet the needs of the whole child, so that we can help all of our children learn better. There is also another piece of legislation that passed, and House Bill 357. And what House Bill 357 said is if SJR 9 passes, then we're going to implement a framework or a systematic approach to funding public education in ways that we haven't done in the past. We are going to commit that as a part of base funding of education, that we will support growth and we will support an inflation factor on the minimum school program. So our goal and our intent is to make sure every year we're providing at least a kind of foundational level of funding for public education. That doesn't mean that's all that public education gets, but it means we approach that actually in the base budget that the legislature passes at the beginning of the session every year. And then as part of the structure we have through public education appropriations, we will consider the uses of additional funds, which might go to increase in WPU. It may go to some other special needs that we have around the state in order to help us support and implement a better approach or more assistance and targeted approach to public education in the state. But that would just go, that would be all the additional funds that would become part of the appropriations process. In order to be able to make sure that we can maintain that, we're going to need to then be able to put money aside in a public education stabilization fund. So we would create, in addition to making sure we get growth and an inflation factor on public education every year, considering other needs, we would also put money in an ongoing public education stabilization fund. Now that money can be, and that would be ongoing money, but we want to be able to build that fund up. So over time, it would take us through what we expect would be the potential of a 2-year downturn in the economy. That way, we would not experience the volatility that we see when we, particularly in the cuts that we see when we have a downturn in the economy. And we would be able to draw from those funds to be able to continue to keep that commitment of being able to fund growth and also an inflation factor by drawing from those funds. As that money is funded every year, that and all the current money we have would be moved into what's called the Uniform School Fund. Now, we talk a lot about the education fund, and that's where we fund most of public education. But in the Constitution, there is a uniform school fund that is actually constitutionally protected. And once we put money in that uniform school fund, it cannot be used for any other purpose but public education. So that allows us to ensure that kind of constitutional protection to protect our funds, while at the same time beginning to stabilize it, because we all have the ability to be able to draw from this public education stabilization fund to continue to provide foundational funding even in particularly challenging times. And that way we will be able to really build a strong kind of growth trajectory for public education in the state. Now, we will do this only if the voters approve it. So this is a proposal we're putting out in front of the voters to let the voters decide. But we think this is a really balanced approach to supporting and growing public education, while at the same time providing some flexibility to meet some of the needs of particular populations we have in the state, to meet some of their other needs, as well as educational needs. And with that, I'm really open to questions. I just wanted to provide a framework on that. You may have questions on that. I'm also open to any other questions that you may have.
This is Joyce. I have a question.
Yes.
Is the intent also to separate higher ed from public ed?
No, we will not be separating higher ed from public ed. That's been something that's been in place for 20 years. And so we don't plan to separate the two. This constitutional amendment doesn't make any change in that.
One thing that I appreciate, given the joint resolution, to address the earmark is how House Bill 357 provides some of those assurances in the event that the voters do pass that. So I believe there's a lot of benefit to how the two come together, and we'll see how the voters respond to it this fall. So Senator Miller, as we all know, we are anticipating economic impact given COVID-19 related events and its effects on our state's economy. Knowing that there's still a lot of details forthcoming as far as the state's budgets are concerned, there was the passage of the Joint Resolution 301 in the special session last week or so ago. Any indication on a timeline as to when we might anticipate the fiscal 21's budget and its impact, COVID-19's impact on education funding?
It's a really good question. One of the reasons that we passed that resolution was to try to provide some direction. We know that in your normal cycles, you're making decisions right now. And as you know, what we really directed people, the agencies, and public ed and higher ed both to do is to really develop a budget based on the base budget that was passed at the beginning of the session. Now, for public education, that also included growth. So you do have growth funded in that base budget. The challenge we have right now is that if you think about it, most of the impact of the coronavirus really didn't impact our economy till about midway through March. That means the third quarter for us is not going to give us much visibility about the impact on revenues in the state. So we really are going to need to wait and see what April looks like, what May looks like. It's probably going to be early June before any of us will really have much visibility on the impact of COVID-19. Unlike other recessions where you it tends to kind of happen, over time, sliding into it. This was much more like a cliff. And none of our models are going to help us to really understand this. We are going to have to wait to begin to see what actual revenues really look like in order then to be able to make better projections for next year. So I think we're all in a holding pattern at this point, really waiting to be able to get projections for April and May that will give us a much better sense of where we are and what the impact will be in state revenues.
So anticipating a special session sometime early to mid-June, it sounds like.
Yes, my expectation is that we'll do something in early June. We know people are really anxious to understand the impact better. So are we, but it's really difficult for us to get a handle on it right now. And I think we are not going to be having our normal interim meetings in May with the anticipation that we really need to wait until early June to get a better handle on where we are. And that way, and both in terms of being able to have committee meetings as well as having a special session, we just need some time from the budget standpoint.
Thank you.
I have to say, I wish we had the stabilization program in place. I wish we'd started it 3 or 4 years ago. I think we'd be in a much better place now in terms of knowing where we are on public education funding, and that we'd be in a much stronger place today if we were able to pull from a public education stabilization fund to be able to support our funding in public education today. So, and actually, public ed will be the only body that does have these protections. Board Member Wilson, I think that's another element of this, is that we are not putting any protections in for higher education. This will be a very focused protection plan for public education only.
Any other questions, comments by board members?
Hi, Ann, I had a question. This is Susan Richards.
Hi, Susan.
I was just wondering, well, first of all, I think it sounds like a wonderful idea. And I was wondering if other states have a plan similar to this.
No, Utah tends to be unique. We're probably the only state. The interesting parts, we're the only state that has a constitutional earmark, yet we still struggle with education funding. And that's one of the reasons I think this plan is so important, in that it's going to allow us to actually finally have a funding framework for public education. So we've had an earmark, but we really haven't had a funding framework that people could depend upon. And I think that's extremely important. So we are so different than other states. I think other states have different models that they use, but this is unique to us, and I think part of the uniqueness comes from our constitutional earmark.
Thank you.
Anyone else? I do want to say I really have been appreciative of our Superintendents Association, the Local School Boards Association, the Utah Association of charter schools, public employees, the PTA, the UEA. I mean, everybody's engaged in this conversation and has been engaged in this conversation. And I think it shows an example of when we kind of all come to the table and work through it and talk together and really think outside the box in some different ways. We can find good Utah-based solutions that support really what's a fundamental commitment to funding public education in the state.
Senator Milner, we appreciate your time, and we would hope that we could do this again in the future. More tonight, we felt like you were going to give us some information. I think in the future there may be opportunities for us to come and say, here's some things that we're concerned about, and pass it on to you that way. So Just-
I would love that, I would welcome that dialogue. And I do try to meet, I have kind of 4 school districts that my Senate district overlaps with. I do try to meet with the superintendents, well, not right now in COVID-19 times, but normally we try to meet 3 to 4 times a year and talk about issues across the districts, but I would appreciate the opportunity to also engage with our local boards as well.
Well, thank you very much. All right, so we'll move on now. Our next item tonight, if I remember right, since my technically challenged iPad won't pull anything up. The bulk approval, is that what's next?
No,
BDK.
the BDK report.
Okay. So Ken is gonna take the lead, or who's leading that?
Yep,
Okay.
I'll start and I'll give our report really quick just on Ben Lomond and then turn the time over to BDK. Let me share my screen really quick. So since I had to submit my board packet, we've had 2 field reports submitted, so I will give you the latest report. You can see a view. This is what the view looks like from the current Ben Lomond Health and PE facility looking east. And that is 7th Street there. As you look at it, there's a bad echo. Okay. Thank you. So with our 3-week look ahead, we've been pouring the running track on the west side. We've also been pouring concrete in the storage rooms. We have dirt at the north parking lot that's being excavated, which is what the image is there, just on the left side of the screen. They're putting in the ADA ramp on the north as well. They're doing a lot of work on the roof, and then masonry should be done next Tuesday. They have just a couple of more areas that they're finishing up. They started the waterproofing work on the east side, so this is the area that'll be covered by the bleachers, but the part that's underground, they have waterproof coating that goes down to prevent any seepage of water into the building. We've got a lot of duct work going on in the weight room and cardio room. They've started framing the interior. They put up padding on the fence on the baseball field along the left field, outfield fence. And then they're getting some roof over the locker rooms. And then they're doing the field measurements for glass to make sure that they get an accurate fit, and glass should be going in the next couple of weeks. And then they're doing spray insulation on the 3rd floor. You can see again there on the left that top image is taken from the roof, and those piles there are the solar panels. And then the middle image here with the yellow insulation there, that is on the east side of the building. And then this is just the interior of one of the rooms there at the bottom. Any questions on the Ben Lomond project?
Yeah, Ken, I have one. Looking at being by there this last week, baseball field has not. When are they going to are they going to lay turf, or are they going to sod it, or are they going to seed it?
Yes, sod should be going down. If they don't start tomorrow, it should start next week. We had to wait for Pineview water to be turned on. It was turned on around the 15th, but there was some leaks further up line, and so they had to shut that off, repair it. I believe it's back on now, but they do want to make sure that they have water on before they lay that sod so that it doesn't kill it. But it should be going down, if not tomorrow, then it should be next week.
That looks looking good.
Are they on schedule?
Yes, we're still on schedule for October 5th for the substantial completion. In terms of delays, the only thing that we have been notified of is there have been some delays with a few of the tile selections, more of the accent tile. And so we have a plan in place to deal with that, and then they're also looking for other possible sources to get the tile from. Unfortunately, a lot of the tile does come from Europe, and so they've had a hard time getting responses and answers to dates and deadlines. But other than that, most of our stuff that's coming in is still on schedule.
This is Joyce, just a quick question, so there's no other supplies or materials that are having any difficulties being delivered? Is that correct?
Right now on the Ben Lomond job, we are good. Currently, we don't have supply issues that we've been made aware of, just the tile one right now. Some of that too is because we're a little bit further along. Some of it too is some of the items are produced here in the US, and so that helps as well. Now on the Wasatch project, we have had a little bit of delay with the installation of the elevator in the new building. The challenge there wasn't necessarily the elevator itself. It arrived and has been in Salt Lake, but they had one of their installers come down with COVID-19, and so their whole crew was quarantined for a couple of weeks, but they've been cleared out, and that should be installed within the next week.
Completion date for that, Ken, is when?
For Wasatch,
Yes,
it's still scheduled for end of July.
Behind, just slow down.
okay, let's,
Any other questions on Ben Lomond?
No, it's looking good.
looks good.
It does.
Okay. So we've got Chris Karchner on, and I'll turn the time over to him to present their report.
Okay, can everyone hear me all right?
Used to.
Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
You're good.
Okay, well, it's good not to be with you tonight, so I hope everyone is doing well. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Yeah, I can see it.
Okay, excellent. All right, so I'm gonna pick up where Ken talked a little bit, talking about some of the COVID-19 work practice that we're doing right now. All of our design meetings are online. Superintendent and I reported last month. All of our owner and architect meeting, for those couple who are on site, are social distancing and everyone else is online. We are taking quite a bit of precautions online right now with the construction crews. All the construction crews have to have a daily discussion with the superintendents about the status of the workforce. We are doing some illness protocols. Masks and gloves are recommended. We are doing the social distancing, cleanliness, work coordination is all being done daily. Everybody needs to check in daily when they come to the site and give a status update. some of the questions that Board Member Wolfman had about the supply chain, as Kim mentioned, we had some issues related to some crews for the elevator section. We are reviewing supply chain updates with our
Right.
So Chris just got COVID-19. Stuck in time.
Chris, you haven't sounded any better. Where did you go?
and now it's been installed. And then also, we're working with the contractors and also with our own parent companies on, pretty much on a daily basis, just trying to keep up with what the trends are in the industry and across the board. We've actually hosted a series of seminars, some of which were intended today, some of which were actually presented today, talking with different educational facility people on what's going on in the industry, so we can try to keep ahead of everything. Here's just a few photos showing some of the protocols. That mask bandit that was not taken by somebody else, that was a selfie, so there was appropriate social distancing. You can see some of the workers are wearing and implementing masks on site. COVID-19 is posted. Here's a photo of the Assistant Superintendent Wasatch doing the check-ins with the subs to make sure and with the crews and seeing how everybody's doing on a daily basis. Wasatch Elementary actually has had over 80 people on site the last couple weeks. The interiors of the existing school, areas 3 and 4 down the south corridor have been painted in carpet. Window frames on the new school, exterior brickwork is nearing completion. Drywall is nearing completion. Most of the secure vestibule is done in the existing building. And as Kim indicated, so that July completion date is for final completion. We are still anticipating substantial completion on June 30th for the buildings. Just showing some of the sites. I know that the board likes some of the most updated photos. The photo on the right was taken a couple days ago, showing the canopies being installed and the brickwork being filled in around them. Some more of the exterior shots showing the brickwork is nearing completion. Just starting cleanup, getting towards that final condition. Some more exterior shots of the building. For some of the interior shots with the mechanical equipment, the fire equipment, and you can see the final drywall is being completed. We've started some preliminary paint. Here's a photo of the Wasatch administration staff walking through, working on their plans. Paint patch in one of the classrooms. Here's a picture of some of the complete, semi-completed work with the carpet and the paint in some of the existing classroom wing. And then, as Zeke mentioned in our meeting a couple of weeks ago, the carpet had just been laid when he mentioned that walk. So that's a picture of the new core, the new ceiling and items along the south corridor. And here's the new media center. Some of the paint is being gone on, and then the new kindergarten, some of the millwork and casework with the new student cubbies. So that's it for Wasatch. Horseman is moving extremely fast as well. We've been very blessed with some good weather.
Chris, can I interrupt you real quick? Or not?
We may be able to ask if you have a question.
Hey, Chris, I've been asked a couple of individuals of the kitchen side of it, how much bigger that's gonna be. I'm sure someone else could probably answer that, but
Yeah, Ken.
Ken?
Yep, go ahead.
Just how much room does the kitchen have? Because notice the freezers or the fridge is being on the outside now. It looks like a little bit, or making it out there. They just was wondering how much more workspace is gonna be available.
Tons. It'll be like a kitchen manager's delight.
Good workspace then?
Yeah.
All right.
Are you asking about Wasatch?
Yeah, that's Wasatch.
Yeah. So yeah, that was the reason we moved the. Sorry, this is really hard because there's an echo and I hear myself talking. So I apologize if I keep pausing because it's a little confusing hearing myself. That's better, thank you. So yes, we moved the freezer out of the kitchen to create more space. It is a smaller kitchen, so it's not going to be huge, but we were able to create a fair amount of space there by moving that freezer outside of the building.
So did we lose Chris?
Last time I didn't, who left?
So I've got Chris's presentation. If you guys want, I can
Let's
go ahead and finish it.
do that since we don't know where he is right now.
Okay. All right, let me pull that up. Let's see.
That's why we're skipping over to Horace Mann. Just a note on, is Mount Ogden about done then?
The kitchen.
Kitchen? They're at.
Yes, Mount Ogden should be done hopefully by next week. When I was in there last week, they had stainless steel in. They had torn out the freezer. They had torn out the walk-in. They were converting it into new office space. So that was coming along really well. Okay, can you guys see my screen?
Yeah.
Okay, let's see. So let me find the slide Chris was on really quick. We were somewhere around here, correct? But,
Just started Horace Mann.
okay. This is a picture of one of the really large footings that they're putting in. There was a ton of rebar there. It was massive. But, it looked like some medieval torture device. And then laying some of the piping and stuff that goes underneath. A couple of the, I think this is around the loading dock that they're putting in. This is the new retention wall. So I believe this is along the east side. It's looking really good.
On the northeast.
I really like the choice that the architects picked for the block and stuff that they put in there. And then this is along the north end. So this is the boundary between the Utah School for the Deaf and Blind and Horace Mann. And this is the new fence on top of the retaining wall that they have there. Any questions on Horace Mann?
That looks really good.
Yeah, we're excited about it. It's coming along nicely. Okay, Polk. So the project did March 13th is when the documents went out to bid. And then we opened the bids on April 14th. We had 5 qualified bidders. So just to remind everybody, we pre-qualify contractors. So we publish it through the RFP process. Contractors can submit their qualifications, and then based on their references, their bonding capacity, that type of stuff, we will then pre-qualify them to be able to bid. So we had 5 contractors. You have that information in your packets. It was on the bid tabulation sheet. 4 of those chose to bid. We had one First Construction that decided day of bid that they were going to pull out. We do have the board approval on the agenda again. And then, as soon as that is done, contracts and submittals are already being worked on the language, so if board approval is given, then we can get the contract signed and notice to proceed. We are working on abatement and equipment salvage. We're trying to move that up. We have been working with the principal, Shannon Wilcox, and our goal is to have the teachers moved out by May 15th so that we can begin abatement. So we are trying to move up a couple of weeks. And lunch and breakfast service will actually end there May 8th so that we can get in there, close down the kitchen, and move that equipment out as well. And so we have the following week to move those items also. And then after abatement is done, then as soon as that's completed, then construction will be able to begin on that. Let me show, well, you've already seen the rendition and the site plan. Any questions on Polk now? We do have it up next for the bid approval, but any other questions on that right now?
So will the lunches be picked up somewhere else, or where are we gonna be?
Yes, they'll be able to go over to Ogden High, that's
Okay.
a block and a half away.
Yes.
They could go to Taylor Canyon as well.
Or
Just so that everybody's aware, just a clarification on the meals program. So it's a federally run program, so it doesn't matter if you're a kid that goes to Taylor Canyon and you pick it up at Polk or at Ogden High or wherever, it actually doesn't matter.
Thank you.
Yeah, and we notify the
You can even
community.
you can even be from Weaver County and still come pick it up. It doesn't take money out of our pockets. It's reimbursed by the federal program. So they'll be able to go to any school of ours to pick up breakfast and lunch.
And
And
any,
the community will know.
yeah,
about
any
that.
adjustments we make, such as these, we make sure that we inform the community, the immediate community, and of their options, so they continue to receive those meals.
Okay.
Well, I'm back on.
Okay, I will stop sharing mine and Chris, so I am on the very first slide of the T.O. Smith Elementary current timeline, so that was perfect timing.
Okay. I apologize, everyone. We had quite the thunderstorm down here and power got kicked off for a second, so I had to reboot everything. Can everyone see my screen with the T.O. Smith current timeline?
Yes.
Okay, so I've got Philip with NWL Architecture on with us as well. I'm gonna go through this current timeline of events and what we're planning on going. And then Philip is gonna talk a little bit about the design progress and why some items on where we're at right now. So I'll go ahead with this piece of the slide. So right now, just give a quick timeline what's happened. We started a design investigation and site considerations last October through mid-December. We had the board approval for the size of the school and preliminary layout in mid-December. We completed the schematic design review, estimate, and design schedule in January. In March, we went to design development, the design review, estimate, and value engineering session. We presented those numbers. Nearly $700,000 in value engineering last month in March. Right now, the design completion for the permit reviews is planned for June, end of June. The month of July, that we'll have the fire marshal, city right-of-way, health department reviews, and the final check sets. At the end of July, we'll put it out for bid for return 3 weeks later in August, and plan on coming to the board for a contractor board approval in September. And then a construction start September, October of 2020. Philip, are you on? Do you want to go ahead and talk about where we're at with some of these design items?
Yeah, I'm here. You guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. So as as Chris mentioned, the kind of the overview of what we've done and what we're looking to do, with the 8 months of design, we'll push this bidding into a summer timeframe. My understanding is this is currently 4 months less than Polk and 2 months less than Horseman. We're not involved with those, but that's my understanding. Another, there's some tight, the management of the dollars with it, value of construction during design adds time during design for reviews. Point there is that we understand, the last of these projects under the bond. So we're just checking those dollars even closer because there's not, budgets further on to make up for that, if you will. As well with that, what was that, Chris? Oh, sorry. The hard bid process is, as you know, is what we're chasing on this. So this will go out to bid and contractors very much like your Horseman and Polk did. And then there have been some COVID-19 delays in design, but at this point it's hard to pinpoint where those are because we're right in the throes of it. But we have been meeting weekly, and the collaboration and all that has happened with both the team that I've pulled together, my engineers, BDK, and the district. We estimate that could be in the 3 to 4 week time for design, just partly because reviews are different. Our DD review was a little different. We weren't in the same room. We went over a couple of days doing virtual calls, but any questions that you guys might have on the schedule of the design for T.O. Smith?
No.
Philip, can you hear? You want to talk a little bit about what our soils condition situation is right now?
Yeah, so one other thing that we've discovered since, our initial meetings when we determined selected the 3 section is we had some unfavorable site soils that in our geotechnical. In fact, we ended up going back and asking for an additional investigation because and many of you may not know this, but there's not a storm drain that is near the T.O. Smith site. So all of the water, the storm water, will be retained on site and essentially just percolate into the existing soil. We had some very close or very tight percolation test results, and that caused us to want to go back and ask a few more questions just because it was getting to the point where we were right on the edge of needing to have a much larger retention basin. So we had that tested again. With the timing of the construction, we're bidding in the month of, our set of documents goes to bidders end of July. The bid opening is looking to be, I believe, August 20th. That'll cause for a fall start of construction. And with that, you're starting the construction and trying to get your walls up and your roof on during some of the cold and wet months. It's not ideal compared to a spring start, but it's not a negative thing by any means. It's just something we want to take consideration of. It potentially increases, I don't think it increases the duration of the project. It more so says we know that we're going to be running some of those important pieces during a wet and winter condition. With that too, the landscaping, the hardscape, really is going to start the beginning of next spring because in the winter you're not going to do any of that hardscape and landscaping around the building, but you could do some of that first year if you started, say, in the spring, early spring to start construction. Any question?
Yeah, just one clarification. So on the site soils, one thing that we do have to do that's going to cause some time increase in construction, not only what Philip talked about, the large amount of retention we have to do, but the groundwater is with only in a foot or two of where we're trying to retain and percolate. We can't get down into that. So that's creating a little bit of complexity, but we have to take out, I believe it's 3 feet of over excavation and replacement, Philip?
Yeah, I believe it's 3 feet. And that's just based on the capacity of the soil. So we're pulling that out and replacing under those major footings.
Okay, so, as Phil indicated, are there any questions from the board about, the T.O. Smith Elementary schedule right now?
Don't.
Do you have a question? All right.
Question. Yeah, go ahead.
So, okay, you said August as far as the start date, so what are you looking for as far as having the occupancy ready date?
Right now, probably March, April of 2022 would be the soonest it would be ready, and then the site work would probably need to continue into April, May.
So that's 20 months?
Just because of some of the things that we were just talking about, the timing and construction looks different. If we could start this thing in May, then it would probably be closer to 16 to 18 months.
Phil, what is that, what you're experiencing, what's been your experience, Phil, as far as the length of the construction?
Yeah, I think Chris is right on with, especially with the starting in the fall versus starting in the spring. I think 20-month to get to where you are occupying the building is a very good time frame. If again, like he said, if you started May at the latest, I think kind of what you're doing with Horace Mann, you potentially can cut a month or two out of that because you are for sure or very likely going to have your roof on before you are really experiencing any of that weather that starts to cause delay. So yeah, I think it's an April, May-ish next year, if you will. That's based on, and really when we say August 20th is the bid date, there's some things that have to happen after the bids come in, with BDK and the district to, finalize contracts and sort of scrub those out, make sure there's not missing pieces, if you will. And so I don't remember, Chris, right in front of me, I don't have that schedule of when we were talking about groundbreaking, but you want to talk about what's kind of been thought through on that?
Yeah, so I proposed to the district about having, I know right now you only have I believe one scheduled later on in September, but potentially having a work meeting at the beginning of September so that we could scrape off a couple extra weeks, and have a groundbreaking mid-September as opposed to doing it end of September, beginning of October.
So I guess I'm struggling with the fact that on December the 12th, we gave the go-ahead as far as the size of the school and moving off-site. And we're talking 10 months before we get started. That sure seems like a long time to me.
You're talking before the bids come in 10 months?
I'm just saying December 12th of last year, we gave you the go as far as here's the 3-section school and we're gonna move the kids off-site. And we're talking 2.5 years from that first domino to when we're done.
Yeah, it is 2.5 years from that, so from you giving the green light, that is correct. It's roughly 30 months. Now we are, from our standpoint, we turn in a set of drawings in June that we are we'll call it our permit set. And what I mean by that is there's a number of jurisdictions that have to review this, plan reviews and fire marshal reviews and even some city reviews. They don't give a building permit like you would on a commercial property, but they still have some utility reviews, which are happening now, so you're aware, coordination at least. But they'll do their reviews, and so the reason we're then taking the month of July to wait to do the bidding is because if we get comments from a plan reviewer or from a utility review or fire marshal, we want to be able to incorporate those comments into the bid set and not have to incorporate them in as a post-bid addendum, which is always a bit of a money issue. You want to keep as much of that in the base bid, if you will, as you can. So, yeah, so you're right, it's 30 months until you're occupying that building, but there's activities that are sort of completed, if you will, much sooner than that, and as early as June, that we are turning in documents to jurisdictions for review.
Yep, moved in the summer because of, the permit reviews and then the bidding process and then the approval process. It adds time to that because we miss the time frame that we want in order to get that done. So if you look at Polk right now, we're looking at 30+ months. If you're looking at Forest Man, you're looking at right around 30 months for design and completion and such like that. This building right now is less than 10% smaller than Forest Man, even though it's a 3-section school just because of the district requirements. And it comes down to the duration, durations for the design process, and we're trying to keep the cost down. It comes down to could we get the school done if we could start it in May, June? Yes. Earlier than that?
You there, Chris?
Question or comments from anybody?
Just a question, Don.
Please.
Hey,
Did we just,
it's impact.
Thanks there.
We didn't know about the soils. We didn't know about COVID. We didn't know
That's excuse.
about some of these things that just shake out in the course of the design and could shake out in the course of construction.
hey, Chris, this is Superintendent. You cut out there a little bit, so maybe you've already answered this question, but I think what also needs to be understood, or perhaps you could shed some light on reconciling. At one point, it was November last year, it was floated the idea that TO could be finished in January. And with that being said, I mean, it was just communicated at that point. And so how do we reconcile, or what would you suggest have been the limiting or delimiting factors that have led to what understandably is so early in the process that it can hardly be considered perhaps a delay, but on some level it is, given some of the communication that came out early that TO would finish as soon as January of 2022.
Sure. I'll we need to assist me with that. Part of that conversation is that between us, Philip experience, my experience, and different things along those lines. So at the beginning of November, when that was conveyed, there was a lot of, we can do this if this happens, if this happens, if this happens, and if this happens. So I think that first and foremost needs to be said. There's a lot of ifs and ands when you're talking about a conceptual design at the time.
Right,
First of all,
so
that would require the design being done in April. The design's not going to be done in April. We went through our processes to try to keep the costs down because pre-COVID, costs were running. So we went through our design session, and when he had not experienced that process when we talked about completing mid-April designs. So that's time and duration, but that's something that we've been training is time for money through the process, try to keep the cost down. Been pretty effective in the cost down. When you look at what Polk just came in when we came in at, schools around the state are building for $300+ a square foot. Both of these are $240, $260 a square foot. So we continued. That's not was going to just that. We didn't know about the site soils at that time period, which adds time to the delay. We didn't know that we would all be meeting remotely. We lose a lot of collaboration in the times of those when it takes to losing those few months because just everyday average things that happen. That idea of it completing required a lot of things to fall in place to have that happen. We lose a few months, we lose the summer for bidding instead of bidding in the spring, we bidding in the summer. That means we lose those early time periods to do footings, foundations when it's not raining, it's not snowing, we can get the building envelope and close sooner. I mean, we're getting a lot of efforts right now on Polk, just to move up the schedule a couple weeks, but in the hope of closing the envelope. Working in order to move on, and Philip, I'm gonna let you talk for a minute. If you can explain some of your reasoning behind the schedule that you talked about for the construction duration and the architectural timeline.
Philip, before you do, Chris, if you would stop presenting, it might free up your bandwidth a little bit, so your audio comes through a little bit clearer. You were really breaking up there for a minute.
Oh, okay, I have stopped presenting. Hopefully that will assist.
Much better.
Philip, I think your mic is on mute. No.
Since we're on that, so the question I have for that is, that we will be open for school business of 2023 then, to have the kids in there and the school open. 2022,
To the fall.
the fall of 2022 and 23 type. So I think that's what we had planned, but just the timing of it.
No.
Yeah, we have lots of hopes that we could squeeze that in. You move the kids off site, you're trying to get this school done sooner. You're trying to stay ahead of the inflationary impact costs. All of those things are things that we've tried to do. You know, we have some very favorable, what looks to be some very favorable bidding conditions this fall. I mean, we just had school come in, that was experiencing 6 to 10 bidders per trade. The private work is dried up significantly, and you know, we really benefited from that. So, I mean, this summer it's going to be extremely beneficial from a dollar standpoint. You know, when we're bidding this project, we talked with all the general contractors through the Polk bid to try to determine, is this a good time to bid? Are we going to run into troubles? And across the board, without question, they were all close to begging the district to go forward with the project, just in terms of, you know, the opportunities. You know, we still very much could experience some supply chain issues, but right now the manpower and the capacity of these companies are looking for this. I don't know, did Philip drop off? Is he still there?
Yes, his machine froze, so he's trying to get back in.
Okay.
Two other things that we talked about concerning this. One was that also July is not a good time to bid with all of the holidays and everything else, that contractors tend to be off a lot during July, and so we felt that August would be a better time, especially since a lot of projects are also finishing up in July, and now they're completed, have more availability, and know what their schedule is in the month of August. And then the other thing that we talked about is, before this meeting, was also the challenges that we've had on a project like Wasatch, where we did rush it to get to bid quickly, and all of the change orders and everything else. And to no fault of the architect, but when you push things through quickly, there are more mistakes. And so we have several $100,000 worth of change orders that we've had to deal with. We would like to not have that on this project. And so part of that too is the vetting process that we go through, the reviews, everything else, so that we have best possible documents that all line up and don't create those issues.
Yeah, you're right, Ken, but the changes of Wasatch had to do with the old structure.
But
Some of it did, but like the newest one I've got is a $40,000 change order, because some of the was it, Chris, the trusses didn't match up or didn't hit the right spot by 7 inches, because there was something that was missed that normally wouldn't have happened if we had all of our reviews and stuff in there.
yeah, it was an architectural, was we didn't run the masonry up at the same to the same height to meet the roof deck.
EDK is supposed to
So
do.
there was a 7-inch gap, and that's the kind of thing that happens in a 3.5-month design period timeframe. You know, for example,
He said, we gotta be in
on
school.
the design review,
They
right,
only have
shortly
this much
before it
time
went out to
to
bid, we pulled 300 more design review comments because we took an extra 2 weeks before we put it out on the screen to make sure it was right. And that's part of that process that
Don't have near as
Philip
much
was
of that.
talking about from end of June
Contractor
to end of July.
$100,000. I don't understand what's our rush.
It's the excuse.
It's unpacked. You can you hear me now, Chris?
That's what they told us.
Yes,
We can hear you.
Yes,
Great. I apologize, my machine froze and I couldn't unmute myself and then my internet just dropped off. So I'm leaving my camera off just in case that was part of it, but one other thing, and maybe you discussed it while I was rebooting, but, you know, when we were looking at when the bid dates were gonna fall and the chance that it was gonna be bidding in the month of July, I think as a group, we made a decision that with the 2 holidays we have in the state of Utah, the 4th of July, of course, and then the 24th, we've never had a good experience when you try to bid a job, even, you know, in between those 2 holidays, because it's such a vacation heavy time. And we just haven't found that contractors get as aggressive, if you will. They just aren't paying attention as much to that in that bidding time. When sort of the opposite happens when you start talking about that month of August, because guys that don't have work lined up for the following year, if you will, are really starting to think about, you know, they've just come off of that vacation, if you will, and they're saying, you better get to work. So I've had a number of contractors reach out and say, hey, when's that TO built, you know, bidding? And I've said at this point, we're looking at the month of August, and they seem pretty excited. So I think with that month of July being a little bit of a wild card, and then with COVID-19, not to harp on that too much, but we don't know what July is going to mean, where people have been sort of stuck at their house, if you will, for this last 6 weeks, it seems. We're wondering what June and July might look like. You know, people just going to get out and vacation as much as they can because they've got a little time, you know, built up, if you will. So we think it's a very strong schedule we have right now, good bidding time, and we've, like you said, Chris, have tried to expedite getting the reviews of the contractors done and get in front of the board to allow for an early September groundbreaking. I believe was the 8th was the date, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, I just want to kind of jump in on a little bit on that about the month of July. So.
so could you just address a comment that, you know, you and I went back and forth on the construction duration, and you had a couple really good explanations of what your thoughts were then versus what my thoughts were, and understanding the difference between a CMGC duration based upon the fact that you skipped the bidding process, whereas I was accounting more for a design bid build. And you explained that very well to me. Would you mind sharing that with the board?
Yeah. So often when we're doing these CMGC projects, meaning your CM rolls into your general, you know, contractor, and it's not every time, but a lot of times that CM can mobilize because their contract with the owner is such that it's been negotiated, or a lot of that has been negotiated prior to those subcontractor bids coming in. Of course, you're waiting for GMP and things like that, but because there's a contract in place, they can mobilize even during that last little bit of scrubbing the subcontractors. We're on a hard bid. You don't really even contract with that general until each of those subcontractors are sort of, you know, vetted out, if you will. And you don't maybe see every sub number, but in this hard bid process, but you're certainly making sure, sort of dotting the I's, crossing the T's on those contracts prior to having that general mobilize. And so on this hard bid process, it may slow down that getting on site a bit, versus doing that more traditional CMGC approach that you see throughout the state quite a bit right now.
So would you be fair to say that some of that process and procurement, we're trading the opportunity to try to save money on the bid versus get started next summer?
Yeah, it's hard to say that, how the money shakes out difference between the two. I think in some cases, the hard bid is less expensive, is more cost effective because it's just a different bidding process than, the CMGC. But certainly from a schedule standpoint, I think the hard bid is a little bit slower to start. But it's hard to put a exact amount of weeks on that. But I just, like, for instance, in elementary school, we finished the CM happened to be a contractor that did earthwork, and so they were essentially grubbing that site before the final GMP was awarded because they knew that was, well, there may have been an early package we put out as well, but again, because we knew there was the ability to have our CM become that site utility contractor, they were out there before that final GMP was established. So it's just a little bit different process than a hard bid school might be.
Right, and we'd actually talked about a potential early demolition package on this school to try to speed up that process, and we realized we weren't really gaining anything in terms of the amount of work that you'd have to do to provide the separate package for us to get it out, and then to have a separate contractor come in later.
Yeah, and the coordination issue of having two contractors that are both touching the site, the finger pointing that you start to see when the demo contractor says, hey, I'm done with the soil remediation, if you will, and then the building contractor comes in and says, hey, this isn't compacted well enough when the building starts to settle, who didn't do their compaction? So what we decided was, let's take that risk from the district away and just have a single general contractor that will do the demolition. They'll carry the demolition subcontractor as well as all the other subcontractors. So I think that was a smart decision to move forward that way.
Okay, superintendent has a comment.
Yeah, Chris and Philip, if we were to boil this down, something that I would strongly encourage is when speaking about timelines, one, considering the audience, two, the confidence in those timelines. For instance, in November last year, we held a community open house. We invited all T.L. Smith, any parents that were interested, into the media center. They heard, several of those families had heard that a January date was feasible. And then we asked pros and cons as to whether or not we move on site or build on site or move off site, things like that. I can't help but wonder if even in that discussion, maybe that discussion would have been different. And then to that end, understanding everything that you've said tonight, or at least at a high level, understanding everything you said, we've got to then go back to that community and say, you know what, that's not actually the case. What you heard isn't actually the case for these reasons, some of which are going to resonate, some of which are not. So when it comes to projecting these timelines, we've got to have some confidence in knowing what those are, because right now it's opened up a situation where, it's a communication issue, and we need to work with the families in understanding that. Now, I can't go back because it's counterfactual. That train has already left the station in terms of where T.L. Smith students are going to go, but I can't help but wonder if, given that conversation that night with that community, if that outcome might have been a little bit different. Again, just illustrating the point of having confidence in dates and timelines and who we share those with and when. Because right now it's difficult to reconcile some of that, given how that message that night was broadcast.
Yeah, I can appreciate that, Dr. Nye. That was, I believe, in November, and even when we were having those discussions, we were not, totally aware of the soil conditions and how that affected a bit the design process of understanding the percolation rates. And that didn't totally slow down the design, but it did add some time as we were going through, where are we placing this retention? There was talk about shifting the location of the building a little bit if we needed to push it, the percolation to where those rates were better on the site. Maybe I spoke out of turn saying that it absolutely could be done by the January date, and we're just finding now that likely not able to happen, right? I mean, we're thinking that it would be very tough at this point to have an opening at the beginning of the year, if you will, a mid-year move-in. So I appreciate your comment. I don't know what the best way moving forward on that is, except for maybe pull that group back together now early and say, this is what we're, looking at now based on the design schedule and when we can break ground.
I appreciate that. Is there,
Dr. Not back on my phone, sorry, I lost connection again.
We can hear you, Chris.
yeah, we can hear. I just, and then we'll engage the community, we will. I do wonder, maybe there's not an answer for it. Did we gain anything on the schedule by moving off-site?
I would say yes, we are still gaining a lot by moving off-site. As you're aware, the building as designed now overlaps a portion of the existing building, and ultimately by not having the building on site while we build, there's not a major issue of are you going to stage the construction, and as well as being able to start the site work, including that retention that we're talking about, immediately as allowed by the weather. So, as soon as spring breaks, as soon as we have a good spring weather next year, so about this time next year, let's say, you could be starting all of the site development, the utilities, as well as parking lots, curb and gutter and all that. If you are to stay on site, as we've discussed in the past, you're looking at not being able to do any of that until the summer that you tear down the entirety of that building, which means you try to tear down a building, do the site, all the play fields, that retention basin, and all of that within about a 2.5 month period, because you still need time to move in and do some commissioning of that building after move-ins happen. So I think the decision is still the right one to move off site. I also think in those community meetings, it felt to me that that was a decision that the community seemed to like, whether they were a mid-year move-in or not. That was just my recollection. But to echo your comment before, I also wonder if those comments would have been different had they known the mid-year was not available.
Great, thank you.
Dr. Knight, may I follow up to that comment?
We're having trouble hearing you, Chris.
Can you hear me?
Barely.
Okay. I do echo your sentiment in terms of being careful and presenting timelines. I've always tried to be very careful in presenting what I feel is a relatively safe timeline. There was some back and forth between the team during those timelines about what we try to achieve, just simply along the lines, the same thing we're doing with Wasatch. We shortened the design duration to a point where we could keep the district's promise to get the school in at Wasatch. On this process, we presented some options. Some of those probably were not within they were probably optimistic. I do feel like, at the time with the things that we knew, that it was barely probable, but it was probable. And I do, if there was some miscommunication in terms of the community feeling like, yes, if we move off site, then this is what will result. But I do want to point out, like Philip indicated, moving off site doesn't change the fact that you would have to tear down at least a significant portion of the school, get rid of most of the portables and such, and still try to conduct school on that campus. What we're doing at Horace Mann is taking away the playground. What we'd be doing at T.O. Smith is losing half of the building space and still trying to conduct school. So the reason for moving school, at least in my mind, and at least in some of the comments, was more about the disruption of the school mission, and less to do with the fact that it was moving in at Christmas time. But that's my perception of the situation.
Okay, are there any other questions the board members may have regarding T.O. Smith?
Where are we in the design process?
So
It was the first slide where,
I mean, I know that was the first, but where, isn't that? Is it on?
If I could address that,
Ken,
you're asking where are we in the design process?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, so we completed a DD review. I was just looking to see if I could find the exact date, but I think it was the 22nd or 26th and 27th of, you have those dates handy, Chris, that it was.
Yeah, we completed the value engineering set on the 27th of March. We completed the design
That's
review and such a few days prior to that. So we're into the construction document phase right now.
Yeah, so we are putting all of the comments from that VE session and all the program requirements into the construction documents for bidding purposes and for permitting purposes. I would say I think we're beyond 50% of CDs, but we're probably close to that with a couple, with about 6 weeks left to go, if I'm not mistaken there. So
I would concur with that.
yeah, we're at 50% CDs.
Right. So it's-
So just for clarification,
Yeah,
so when they talk DD, they're talking about the design drawings, basically. Here's what we're gonna do, and then they move into what they call VE, or value engineering, and so that's when they sit down with all the engineers, they go over these design drawings. Where is there confusion, where are there possible ways to save money in how this thing is designed? And based on that, then they move to construction drawings, and that's where they
That's where
put
we are now.
together what the bid document, what is gonna go out with the bid documents
okay.
that the contractors will use to put their bids together. So the more refined those construction drawings can be, then the less apt we are to have whoopses come along that result in large change orders and things like that. So in my mind, the process has been good, because especially the last two jobs that we had, where we've actually been able to take the time we've needed to in design, in value engineering, in putting together the construction documents. When we bid Horace Mann, we had several bidders, and they were all in a really tight, they were all really close in what they bid. We had the same thing happen with Polk, albeit two of them were clear outside the ballpark, but they were within $100,000 of each other. So that tells me that what's hitting the street for construction drawings for these contractors to use when they submit their bids is good. And what we're talking about here is the same thing. So it is what it is at this point. I don't know, we can go back and play, but that doesn't really change where we are. And so we'll have some really good drawings hit the street.
Good.
We'll have the bid opening. I have every reason to believe that we'll have good prices come in because of the timing. As Phil talked, I think ideally August is gonna be an ideal time. A lot of people are looking for work and things like that. And really, when it comes down to the timeline, it boils down to having 2 summers to work versus 2 winters to work. And the reality is that's where we are. We're gonna be working through 2 winters and 1 good summer with some spraying time. We'll be into the building. We'll have lots of time for the custodians and whoever, the teachers. They can take their time getting moved in and testing out the building and make sure it's all working like it needs to, so that any problems can be resolved before the kids and before the teachers get back in the building.
any other comments for board members? Now, let's move on to, there's a Polk approval, is that where we're at, Ken?
Yes. So each of you should have received a few documents. One is the board synopsis. So I will share that with you just in case.
You got nothing coming up, Nancy? You got
Hey,
anything
you guys see
coming up?
that?
Oh, I lost it.
No.
It's coming.
No,
There it
it's coming
is.
up now. Okay,
Okay. Are we good now?
yes.
All right,
Can't
perfect.
see me anyway.
So, we had the bid last month. We had, as I mentioned earlier, we've had 4 contractors submit bids. Hughes General Contractors submitted the lowest base bid of $25,873,000. This price does include a $1 million contingency for unseen conditions on Polk, which we anticipate we're gonna have because there are so many unknowns there still. And then just so that everybody, just as a reminder, any money that's not used in this contingency is credited back to the district. So during the bid process, we also had 2 alternates. Jeremy had asked me a question earlier. So whenever we do our alternates, those are part of the RFP process. So we have our base bid, and then each one of the alternates are part of that. So they submit a price for the base bid, and then each one of the alternates they list on a different line item. Just wanted to clarify, alternate 1 and alternate 2 is an either or. It's not a both. So Sun Helix is a particular type of solar panel. This is what we put on Ben Lomond Health and PE facility. There is another solar panel called Creative Energies that, in working with our electrical engineers, determined that it would be an equivalent to this higher quality solar panel. And so we felt it would be advantageous to bid both of them and keep them as alternates so that we could not only get more competitive pricing, but also then be able to select which one. And so when we received the bids back, alternate number 1 for the Sun Helix solar panels came in at $250,000, while the Creative Energies came in slightly higher at $267,000. So again, we feel they are equivalent in talking with our electrical engineers. And so based on that, we are recommending that we do the alternate number 1 to go with the Sun Helix solar panels at $250,000. So when you take the base bid from the Hughes General Contractor submitted, along with alternate number 1, that comes in at $26,123,000. When you add that to the proposed budget, so just a reminder, the other costs are often deemed as soft costs. The construction costs are considered the hard costs. So when you add those 2 together, it would come in at $29,997,390. In terms of implementation, again, I mentioned earlier, once approval is given, so if that happens tonight, then we will notify Hughes General Contractors. They will receive their notice to proceed, and we've already been working on them preliminarily, anticipating this to happen. So we've been working on some contract stuff, trying to get language, but nothing has been signed yet. We're working to get that finalized, but they will have their notice to proceed. We're already working with the school to get teachers moved out and items to be moved by May 15th so that abatement can take place shortly after. And then once abatement has been completed, last board meeting, you approved the abatement for that as well, with Rockmont contract or construction. So once abatement is completed, then Hughes General Contractor will be able to mobilize and begin construction on Polk Elementary. Let me switch over really quick to the bids, just so that you can see those really quick, because that's often a question as well. So we did receive bids from Arno Construction, Bud Mahatz, Wagner Corporation, and Hughes General Contractor. First Construction was the one that chose to not bid, even though they had been pre-qualified. And you can see each of the bids, again, all coming in together during the same RFP process. Are there any questions?
Pretty good.
Hey, Ken, just a follow up from last time this was presented. What was there any determination that you can share the difference between the bid costs? You know, we had 2 to the north, 2 to the south, so to speak. Anything there that the board needs to be aware of or help shed light given what was shared last board meeting?
So, Chris, I don't know if you maybe want to speak to that. I know that you guys had talked a little bit to some of the contractors.
Yes,
Inside trading.
can you hear me, Dr. Nye?
Yes.
Okay, so I did, Steve and I did spend a fair amount of time working with all four of them, going through what they felt with their taxes. Now, some of it related to self-perform items that, we go back up just 10 seconds real quick. So understand the nature of the whole project. We are keeping the 1926-27 building. We are cutting it, putting 6 of concrete on the inside to try to make that structure. We're replacing truckers. We're putting quite a few reinforcing rod to make that building stable. And we're tearing down the 50 structure and putting it to cover lines. And so that seems to be the primary difference between the 2 sets of the bids. The 2 sets of bids are $70,000 apart. So they both felt like that their approach met the criteria of the documents, but that's what was going to take work through the project. Does that help to explain some of that?
Yeah, thank you.
Hey, this is Joyce, but there's so much echo and so much garbled words coming across. It's so difficult to hear.
Joyce, is it just with Chris or is it with me or anyone in the boardroom as well?
It's mostly with Chris, and I'm assuming it's his connection, like Jeff said, but it's just really hard to hear.
Okay.
So, Joyce, just to maybe kind of recap, basically, what Chris was saying is that Bud Mahas and Hughes General Contractors tend to have a little bit more experience in renovation work, and so they are a little more familiar with the risk or lack thereof, and so their bids tended to reflect that, whereas the other contractors maybe didn't have as much experience, so there's appeared to be more risk to them, and so that risk is what's calculated into their bid, and so that's why that was one of the reasons as they tried to go back and talk to the contractors. That was one of the main things that was discussed with them.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions on the bulk bid and budget?
No, I think you answered that there, Ken, and Chris, obviously. Just to clarify for the board is that we feel Hughes does well with renovation and hooking up a new building to that renovation. So we feel comfortable with that bid. It's not gonna come in and eat up all that contingent or find even more. Is that what I'm hearing?
I sure hope not. They are the ones who did Ogden High,
Okay,
if you recall, and so they are very familiar with restoration work and what it takes to do that, and the micropiling and everything else to add the seismic upgrades to that facility. So they do have a lot of experience in that, and that is our expectation. So yes, Doug.
all right, thanks.
I just want to say that that's good to know. Thank you.
wanna do a proposal then?
Go for it.
Well, I'd propose with that, then award Hughes Contractor to go ahead and build Polk Elementary.
Motion's been made by Doug to accept the used bid for Polk Elementary. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
For President Belknap, I'd like to add Alt 1.
Yes, with alternative one.
Thank you, Jeremy. So, motion was made. Jeremy pointed out Alt 1. Jennifer, was that you who gave the second?
Yes.
Okay, did you get that? With that and with that proposal, Alt 1, a motion is made. All those in favor, please say aye.
President Belknap,
Yes.
really quick though, it was also requested to approve the overall budget along with that. So all of the soft costs and stuff as well, so that we don't have to keep coming back. So I just want to reiterate that in case anybody wants to amend that motion.
And that's the 29,997 you said?
Correct.
I'll amend it for the 29,997.
That's what I assumed you meant when you showed that. Just so we understand, it's the complete budget of the 29,997,390.
That's right.
Yes.
Okay, that's the motion with the Alt 1. And a second's been made. Those in favor, please say aye.
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 I heard Joyce, I heard Susan, I heard Jeremy, and I heard Jennifer, correct?
Correct.
Great.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. All right, next on the agenda that I cannot see.
Astrocamp vision.
Astrocamp.
Tim Peters.
Tim, are you there?
I am. So thank you, Board President, and also joining me in the presentation is our fantastic principal at Odyssey Elementary, Sonia Davidson. So she's going to join me in presenting our new vision for Astrocamp. So I'm going to go ahead and present. Okay, so can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. So what we're going to be talking about today is kind of an update of where we've been with Astrocamp and all the things that it's been able to do for our school district and our kids, and kind of this new vision of where we are moving forward. So one of the things, just kind of a quick update is kind of where we've been. So you've kind of known Astrocamp. We've had Annika Jensen, our Astrocamp director, come and present on the summer camps, the overnighters that we do during the summer, and then the field trips. These are the ones where the schools come out to Astrocamp to do these morning activities. And then Astrocamp, which of course has been a 26-year legacy in our school district. So it's been around a long time. It's been a great enhancement to the learning experience. And what we want to move to is what is it going to, how do we move from enhancement to being an integral part of our learning experience district-wide? So if you can see here, at Astrocamp, we had the field trips, a lot of different activities that different schools could sign up for based on whatever interests them or what they were studying at the time. So anything from Earth and Sun to fossils and dinosaurs, but didn't always align to the science curriculum. And so that's kind of where the vision that we're going to start heading towards. The other thing is that you could, schools could opt to do two other types of missions. There was the shuttle mission and what it was like to be an astronaut. And if you ever come out to Astrocamp, you can see where we have the mission control and the shuttle itself, the communications department, and the kids work on an actual simulation of a shuttle mission. And then we have this engineering challenge component that we've been doing. But what we wanted to look at is we've been noticing over the last several years, kind of asking the question, well, who's coming to Astrocamp? And so you can look on this slide, you can see that, and this reflects classes. So it's not necessarily numbers of students, but a class. So a teacher brings their class,
It could be, anywhere from 10 students to 30 students coming. And in the last 2 years, we've been averaging about these numbers. Ogden School District, 79 classes. And to put that in perspective, if you were to take all of the teachers in the elementary, it's going to be somewhere around 250 classes. So you can see it's about a third. Then you can look at the other districts or charters that participate in Astro Camp. And then this next slide kind of shows like, what does that look like? And you can see this is a typical week of what Astro Camp looks like, where you have different schools coming in and the programs they're doing. But if you also notice, there's big kind of chunks of time where it's not being active. So the last couple of years, working with Sonia, with Vincent Artizone, who's been helping us out, our science folk who've been kind of brainstorming and talking about like, what could we do to enhance not just AstroCamp and make it exciting, but how can we enhance and strengthen our science curriculum and learning in all of our grades? And then you can look at this. We also talk about summer. So you can see in the summer camp schedule, which is separate from our year program, the summer program, kids select, it's an individual student. So instead of classes signing up, individual students sign up, and then they pay this cost in order to participate. And the one thing that we've been finding out the last several years is that we've had less and less students who go to our schools attend. It's been roughly 10 to 15% of the students who participate in the summer program actually attend our schools. So to kind of talk next about our vision, what we want to move AstroCamp, we're going to have Sonia is going to lead us in that discussion. So Sonia Davidson.
Thank you, Tim, and thank you, board members, for allowing us to share this exciting new vision and mission and kind of some of our goals of the direction that we want to go. So, as Tim said, we have really been discussing for the past year or so about how to integrate AstroCamp more fully into the learning in our district. And in drafting this new vision statement, we really wanted to make sure that it aligned pretty closely with our district strategic plan. So making sure that there was a focus on literacy and graduation, and really thinking how we can use AstroCamp to ensure that our students are college and career ready. And so when we're thinking about that new vision, Tim, would you click forward to the next slide, please? Thank you. In thinking about that new vision, and keep in mind, this is just a draft vision statement. And one thing that we are really looking forward to doing is really fleshing out this vision statement with a group of stakeholders. So our new AstroCamp specialist, our STEM specialist from Odyssey, some district personnel, and then also including some of those industry and community partners to make sure that we're able to pull in everyone to make sure that they have a voice in what we want this new vision to look like. But a draft for it could be leverage those existing AstroCamp resources to provide a learning environment in which teachers and students will explore STEM, so science, technology, engineering, and math together to ensure that that students are college and career ready. Tim, will you go on to the next slide, please? And then in thinking about our mission statement, and this timing actually aligns quite well. For those of you that are familiar with our science standards, our state science standards, we have recently moved from our pre-existing science standards into these new SEED standards. 6th through 8th grade have implemented in the previous couple of years, and kindergarten through 5th grade will be implementing this next year. So it aligns quite well to have a new mission for AstroCamp that aligns really nicely with those new science and SEED standards. So the mission would be all kindergarten through 6th grade students in Ogden will make sense of the world around them by exploring the engineering design process and real world phenomena aligned with the SEED standards for science. will you move forward? Thanks, Tim. And then our new goals are really, as Tim said, previously Ogden students have been a very small portion of the students that are accessing Astro Camp both during the school year and during summer camps. We have this amazing resource right here in our district, and we really want to make sure that we are prioritizing Ogden district students and making sure that they have access to that amazing learning experience. So our number one goal would be to ensure that all elementary students attending Ogden schools have an Astro Camp experience. One caveat for that, I think we are currently trying to puzzle through if that is an on-site experience for some of our upper grades, and allowing our younger grades to access that Astro Camp learning and that theme-based learning at their school. So we're kind of trying to work through some of that, but we do want every elementary student in Ogden district to have access to that Astro Camp experience. We also want to make sure that Astro Camp is fully integrated into Odyssey Elementary School. I have a historical perspective on this, having been a teacher and an instructional coach at Odyssey before I returned as the principal. It always has been seen very much as kind of a segregated or separate program. And I'm very excited to see that program really integrated into our school. And then last, we want to align those learning experiences for the current SEED standards for science and engineering education, and make sure that we're using that Astro Camp resource to provide those learning experiences for our kindergarten through 6th grade students. Will you move forward onto the next slide, Tim? Thank you. So in looking at how we provide, I'm sorry, let me ask, were there any questions before I move on?
Sonia, unrelated, what's your enrollment at Odyssey right now?
What is my enrollment?
Yes.
We are at about 550 students.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So in looking at how we provide that Astro Camp experience for all, so as we said, we really want it to be a priority to Ogden District schools. So one way that we've looked at doing this is a grade-specific field trip each month. So having each grade level have a month that they came to Astro Camp and really engaging in a focused science activity that is specific to the new SEED standards for that grade level. That suggested schedule could look like a 90-minute hands-on project or a lab, and then a closing activity for 30 minutes. Keep in mind, this would be a co-teaching opportunity for the classroom teacher and the Astro Camp specialist. So that teacher would be engaging in the learning too, not just a field trip where they get to come and kind of sit back, but they would really be engaging in that teaching and learning with their students. The mornings for that new Astro Camp specialist would be dedicated to field trip experiences, and then the afternoons would really be dedicated, and this is the part that I'm the most excited about, to that school collaboration district-wide. So making sure that we are providing learning opportunities and talent development for science for our elementary education teachers. So one possible schedule that this could look like, these are some of the new SEED standards for kindergarten through 6th grade, or kindergarten through 5th grade. 6th grade already have the standards that are obviously included in this because they're at the elementary school. So it could be all kindergarten classes engaging in some Astro Camp learning based around weather patterns, for 3rd grade engaging in learning on the effects of traits on survival, or 5th grade looking at cycling of matter in ecosystems. And this is of course just a draft. But one way that I think that this could be very effective, during school dismissal, we have learned a lot about how we can engage in professional learning across our district with district-wide collaborative teams for all grade level teachers, and what a great way to continue to integrate some of that district-wide learning. So this new science specialist could help to provide for that professional development for all of our teachers at these various grade levels. They could then provide some pre-learning for their students before they then came to Astro Camp for that field trip experience. So kind of that professional development cycle for teachers, and then engaging in that co-teaching once they actually get to Astro Camp. And then another piece of this is making sure that Astro Camp is part of Odyssey Elementary School. So Astro Camp is Odyssey Elementary. Fridays, in looking at a tentative schedule, Fridays could be exclusively set aside for Odyssey classes. That's something that we have done previously and our teachers and students have really loved it. We have a half-time STEM specialist who currently works at Odyssey. And so she would have full access to those facilities every afternoon along with all of our other teachers. And then most importantly, we want to make sure that Astro Camp staff is really integrated with the Odyssey faculty, with the expectation to support science instruction in the classroom. So once again, not seen as a separate program, but fully integrated into the Odyssey faculty and helping to support science there. Any questions before I turn the time back over to Tim?
I've got one, Sonia. Where we are in this off-site learning right now, how much of this would be able to be incorporated in an off-site learning for the other students? Since we've been talking more of outsiders coming in, how can we open it up even that to the outside learning?
Yeah, great question. So are you talking about like distance or virtual learning?
Yeah, the distance learning where the student, if they do choose to stay, but they wanted to learn more about this, they're able to chime in on it without going to the school.
Yeah, so I think all of our eyes have been opened to the amazing learning opportunities that can be provided virtually or digitally during the school dismissal time. I am certain that there are opportunities for students to engage in that learning even if they choose not to come to Astro Camp. We have learned so much over the past month through Google Meets and Hangouts and the fact that we're holding a board meeting like this. So I'm certain that there are learning opportunities that can be provided off-site if that were an option. Any other questions?
Hi, Sonia, it's Susan.
Hi, Sue.
How are you?
I'm good, thank you.
You sound wonderful. I was just wondering about our special needs kids.
Yeah.
Will you have groups of specific time for those children?
That is a great question and definitely something I think as we look at drafting that new vision and mission statement and really making sure that we are taking the needs of all stakeholders into account. I appreciate you bringing that up, and I think that is something that we would definitely want to consider. I know oftentimes for field trips, our special needs students are included with their grade levels and are able to access field trips that way. But on the off chance that they weren't, I think that we would definitely want to provide those opportunities for them, perhaps in a modified or accommodated way. So thank you for drawing my attention to that as well.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions or comments? It looks absolutely wonderful.
Just a comment, President.
Sure, Superintendent.
Sure, appreciate the work that's gone into this. We've been discussing this now for about over a year, identifying the opportunities, the possibilities. As this has come together under their leadership, it's just been phenomenal to see, and we know it's going to benefit more students, particularly Ogden School District students, and those at Odyssey are really just in for a real treat, a real opportunity. And of course, we're going to make that available to all of our students. But really, I believe, delivers on the intent of having Odyssey as this space when it was constructed in this way to provide that maximum opportunity to the kids that attend that school. And that's really, it's really exciting. So I appreciate all the work that's been and the thoughts that have been going into this to get us to where we're at today, and look forward to how it develops in the near future.
Thank you.
And thanks, Superintendent. I know just a couple of items here that I think we tying this all together is this emphasis on strengthening the science core of the instruction. And so to kind of answer some of your questions, Susan, as well, is how do we meet the needs of all kids? So we're looking at, we're in the process of hiring a new elementary science specialist. Annika is going to be leaving us for some other opportunities. And so we're bringing in a new specialist who's going to not just be the director of Astro Camp, but to lead science instruction throughout the district. So this concept, this idea is to how do we build the capacity of our elementary teachers to teach and deliver science throughout the school district, not just this one-time event. And in this case, we structured it so it's multiple days, pre-assignments in the classroom. They come, they do the AstroCamp experience, and then there's like a post assessment that the kids learn. Because we went to AstroCamp, this is what we learned. But how do we build the excitement and the capacity of every elementary teacher to be able to deliver science instruction? And so we'll be looking at different models. Could be like kinder or first grade, but we're going to push out to the schools with science specialists is co-teaching with that kinder or first grade teacher. And it's also a model that we've done this past year. Kami Olson, who's been our secondary science specialist, she has done an amazing job working where she goes into the junior high schools, the high schools, and she'll be there, like stay at Highland for 3 straight weeks, working with the teachers during their prep time, planning lessons, co-teaching a lesson, looking at the feedback. And that has just been, we've been having so many positive comments from teachers about we're struggling with these new standards. And then here we have this expert who can help guide them through that process. So that's been really this model that we're looking at. And then again, we go emphasize the benefits of this new vision of building that capacity of the teacher and that co-teaching concept. And one thing I just want to circle back to is how do we get more of our kids involved? We had like 74, 75 classes visit. How do we get it so we have 250 classes? So we build this where teachers will see this is really critically important to my students' learning. We need to go to AstroCamp. It's not just this reward, but what can we do? And then we could also, much like when we did STEM League, we had all these competitions where different classes could do a challenge and then see how they would perform against other schools. And so we're looking at how can we, like for the month that's 4th grade, how can we build in a challenge there during the kids' experience where they can compare their scores to other schools. That's one idea. And then the month of May, we're looking at redoing our shuttle missions. They've been very kind of script-oriented, where you read a script. But how do we could probably create more engagement if we got more of like an Apollo 13 type of moment, where all of a sudden something's gone haywire on the shuttle and the team has to come together to figure that out. The kids can kind of compete, see who comes up with the best design. So those are kind of the ideas that we want to do to kind of make it a little more exciting moving forward. So the last piece I wanted to talk about was summer. So all the discussions that Sonia and I have been talking about have been about the main school year, what to do at the summer camp. There's different options that we want to see that we can move forward. It could be to continue, allow a third party to come in and run the AstroCamp the way it's normally been done, like Douglas Science Foundation, or we can roll this into our regular day summer school program. But we would need to find a different funding source for this. But that's kind of our presentation. Any questions?
So are the summer camps for this year, are they gonna happen? Have they been canceled?
Yes, we are going virtual. So Annika and her team are designing those to be virtual experiences. So we've had some families back out because there's nothing like doing the overnight experience. And of course, there's always that hope that we'll be able to open up, but we've been kind of letting people know, much like our academic core summer program that JM runs through Equity and Access, that we're planning on a virtual experience for this year, and that's our plans for AstroCamp as well.
That looks really good.
This is Joyce. I have a question. I saw in the past that there were a few years that the AstroCamp was operating in the red. And so I'm assuming, so please verify, that you're looking at cost, of the various programs. I've also had a concern in the past of, I think the reason we had low numbers, 79 classes, is because Ogden School District classes were being charged, which I have a difficult time with. So how have you looked at the cost to run various programs within AstroCap?
Great question. So we're working with JM and how we can braid some of our title funds. The idea is our plan is not to have any charges for the schools. Because yes, they've had to come up with busing costs, they've had to pay for a fee. Usually that fee ended up paying for the staff assistant. During the school year, the actual supply costs are very small. We currently have just a little over $20,000 in carryover that we can continue to utilize and leverage for supplies and equipment. One of the large costs that's there is the cost of the instructor, the director of Astro Camp. So that's a full FTE that has been expended. If you go back to the days with Ed Douglas, Ed was a classified employee. And then when we made the decision to bring in a teacher, a licensed teacher to leverage that experience, to be able to start to teach more of the science standards, that's when some of our costs raise. So that's where that FTE comes in. But again, we're going to be braiding some of those title funds to be able to do that.
So regarding the funds, have you thought about reaching out to any of the aerospace partners that we have in our county?
Yes, very much so. So one of the things that, like Sonia was talking about, having an advisory committee, we already have partnerships that Annika, our current, where we bring them in to help out with like these parent nights. We've had some of the rooms that equipment has been donated by some companies, but we want to start to really ramp that up. But one example with work-based learning is the work that Vincent has done with the Mount Ford Innovation Center. He was able to bring in a $100,000 grant foundation that through the POW Foundation. So we want to start leveraging more of those types of opportunities. And then we just hired a replacement for Vincent Artizone. Vincent ran our STEM through the CTE programs and the work-based learning. The work-based learning position, that's where we make those connections with our industry partners, and so that they engage students in that learning. So when the kids are learning, like, how does this apply to industry in the real world? So that new position won't be an administrative position, it'll be a teacher specialist position. And so that person will be working with the Astro Camp director and how do we contact industry industry partners and get them involved. But yes, we definitely see them as a potential revenue and funding source where they see, hey, here's the excitement. We've got to create a pipeline early with our kids. What Astro Camp also really falls under is within our CTE, our career and technical education programs. In fact, like we're running our needs assessment right now for our Perkins funding. It all relates to what is the pipeline. What happens to get kids engaged to do rigorous STEM-related careers? How do we engage, let's say, non-traditional populations like girls in engineering? And some of those efforts have been done with our STEM programs that we've been reaching down. We've just, like at Lomond, we had 15 girls who were completers in our engineering pathway. That was through the work that was being done through those STEM initiatives, the work that had been done over the last several years. So we want to leverage that so that more and more elementary kids have these STEM experiences, and then it's reinforced in junior high and then into high school. And then employers see this as, hey, here's our workforce. And so, but Sonia.
And I was just going to say, the exciting thing that I really see about this new kind of vision with this program is having that AstroCamp person also working with all of our elementary school teachers in that elementary science capacity, because then they can really help to build that pipeline at the elementary school. I know that I have students that are interested in STEM that are, doing Lego League and doing our robotics club after school. But if that's happening in every classroom consistently across the district, it just builds that pipeline earlier and makes a stronger pipeline as they transition into junior high. We can start making those recommendations for courses and then transitioning into high school and then, college and career beyond. So I'm quite excited to see that role enveloped a little bit more with collaborating with all of our elementary teachers across the district to just strengthen that pipeline at the elementary level.
Right, thank you both.
Yeah.
Any other comments, questions for these two? A great presentation. We thank you very much for the work that's gone into this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Since I don't have a copy of the agenda, is that it for tonight?
That is.
I want to thank everyone who's been here and participated, from district staff and BDK and Jer Bates and Cameron with technology. Again, appreciate it. Superintendent, business administrator, and Paula all here tonight. Grateful for Doug and Nancy for being here in-house. We look forward to one day being back all under the same roof. With that, we will say good night and have a good weekend.
So I don't know.
Good night. Thank you.
Sorry.
Good night.
Good night.